I'm live. Finally. I wanted to do something silly this week because I was kind of bored of doing the same thing over and over. Even though I like the games I'm playing, I wanted to do something a little on the sillier end. And also, it's a new season of Guilty Gear, which means that people are arguing over tier lists again, which is all fine and well and a lot of fun to argue over and get involved in. But also, I've just been watching a lot of YouTuber stuff. I want to do something that's just a little sillier. Reminder, of course, that there is no such thing as an Ironmouse fighting game or VShojo fighting game, although they did debut a new member, quotation marks around the word new, yesterday, in Giga, who's been a longtime friend of the company's talents, especially the core talents. And her pickup by VShojo can be adequately described as about goddamn time, you know? About goddamn time. But the main thing is, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about season 3, and somewhere along the way I was thinking, you know what? Ironmouse just has a ton of costumes. If you were to actually make an Ironmouse only game, you could make a pretty strong roster out of it. And like, even right now, as you can see, I have like something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 16! 16! 16 of her costumes! That's a lot of costumes for one person! That's a lot of costumes! And she always comes out with more every couple of months or so, or like alternates. In fact, some of these are actually alternates of her like season 1 model, technically. And that's always fun. Ironmouse probably has like the single most costumes of any VTuber I can think of, and this includes agency costumes, where they every once in a while they just get new ones to complement whatever project they have going on. Right? That's a lot. I should probably do like if I do streams like this again, they'll probably be of groups rather than a single individual, because there's a lot over there to go over. But let's not take too long to get into things. I have 2 windows open right now. Tier Maker, obviously, and also the VTuber wiki on Ironmouse's page, because that's the easiest way I can think of to actually like show off all her models at once. Let's see. Pretty sure I didn't dox myself or anything by showing this, but yeah. Okay, so let's not take too long to get into it. First, the season 1 motto. Let's see if that shows up properly. That does. The season 1 model is probably her most famous model. So this means that if we were to talk about fighting games, if we were to talk about Ironmouse fighting game, the season 1 motto would be Ryu. The fundamental for every single fighting game out there is the Street Fighter 2 style World Tour or World Championship Ryu. That means that what can we expect from her? We can expect a decent fireball, probably invincible reversal, a good old Dragon Punch or Satan Punch in this case. Relatively normal pokes, relatively normal range. This is the basis in which all Ironmouse fighters are based off, right? The Ryu model, or the Ironmouse Season 1 model. It would be like B tier at most. Because let's face it, Ryu's kind of boring. And also, although Ryu does set like the basic standard for fighting game logic, as it would for it therefore would be for Ironmouse, right? But the thing about that is that setting the floor doesn't necessarily set the ceiling for it, right? It also doesn't like fully explore what's possible within a fighting game, and therefore in an Ironmouse fighting game, the season 1 model would basically be a tutorial model. It would basically teach you the very fundamentals of Ironmouse, which it is, but would not necessarily be the most popular version of her, right? So therefore the Ryu model. However, the good thing about the Ryu model is that although by itself it isn't necessarily the best of the best, it's always playable. It's always playable. That kind of works against itself as well, as with any fighting game. The face character for a fighting game tends to be the one that's most heavily explored and understood by both beginner and intermediate players alike. So at that point, it becomes a little hard to like catch people by surprise with it, right? But that doesn't mean that there isn't more to offer from that basic model, right? Its evolutions, its mutations, all tend to create something a little extra. So for example, this, let's see, what version was this? What of this was? Let me bring it up. This, for instance, is the Christmas outfit of the Season 1 Ironmouse. And Christmas outfits tend to be a little more powerful, right? Christmas alternatives tend to show a little more pizzazz, tend to be a little more embellished. This would be what we call the Ken of Ironmouses. The Ken of Ironmouses. Still within the same Shokan school, right? Still under the same basic logic, but also just a little flashier. Just tweaks the formula enough to give a little more punch. And just like a Ken, that also tends to mean that they, whatever strengths they give, whatever weaknesses they accrue by giving up certain core strengths from the basic Ryu model, they tend to gain a hard advantage in ways that are harder to deal with than with the Ryu model, right? Especially if you're primarily facing Generation 1 character, the embellishments they make on that character to strengthen certain attributes tend to be extremely powerful. And if you've played Ken in Street Fighter 6 recently, you know what I'm talking about. Because it's one thing to be hit by Ryu's Dragon Punch. It's another thing entirely to be hit by an OD Ken Shoryuken. That thing hurts. That thing hurts a lot. So alternatives. So in general, the alternatives to Ironmouse's Season 1 models can be seen as a step up, right? They're a little bit more unusual than the base model. There's less to... you're in for more of a ride with them. And in general, that just gives them a step up over what you're usually playing. Now, of course, there is an exception to that. Because for every Ken against the Ryu, there's also going to be the Dan, which is basically just a joke model, right? In this case, it would be Ironmouse's. What was it? I think it was the Halloween model, right? Yes, the Halloween outfit, the season 1 Halloween outfit, right? Now, this is not saying that it's a bad character by any means, or bad design by any means, of course, as I've stated, and the disclaimer up in the corner over there. But the thing about joke models, the thing about seasonal models, is that they tend not to be very playable. They tend to be art-based, solely there to get people to buy the alt and buy the costume if you're playing Street Fighter 6, without having a whole lot of merits on their own, because they tend to be clones of the base model without adding anything, and tend to have weaker movesets, weaker specials to make up for the fact that it just looks prettier, right? Unfortunately, that means they're not played a whole lot. If you happen to play a lot of gacha games, you realize that the seasonal characters, although they tend to be something that you're tempted to spend money on, aren't necessarily something that is going to carry your team in the long term. They tend to get par creeped out really, really rapidly. GG, what's up? Welcome to the stream. But yeah, that means that by itself, they're up against a much more powerful versions of her. Actually, wait, this is also the season 1. Yeah, this is like a season 1 alt. Oops, actually, yeah, I guess I did that. I guess the longer hair version would give her a B+ grade. So we put her over here. Yeah. Special versions of base character models in the fighting game tend to be just a little bit more extra, you know? Like Evil Ryu, for instance, it's a much more interesting character than base Ryu. Although that's not necessarily the most powerful depending on the version. Because I'm pretty sure he got nerfed in Street Fighter 5. Actually, yeah, in that case. Yeah, weaker version. Or niche. Not the most common appearance. Now, in contrast, when we move up to Season 2, for instance, a Season 2 character, the Season 2 version of Ironmouse, is overall an upgrade. Hard to dispute that. In general, the stats are tweaked, the performance levels are tweaked. In the fighting game, in terms of fighting game characters, this would be like taking... Let me see, where is her Season 2 model? There we go. A lot more details, a lot more embellishments, having a lot more fun with the character, being a little looser with the overall design, because she can get away with a lot more at this point, right? So yeah, a season 2 would be necessarily a step up. This becomes a new standard, and just as how Guilty Gear has become a more balanced game over time, with better overall grasp of design principles and fighting game principles, and just as how Street Fighter 6 overall is a much more nuanced and stronger game, despite having some really powerful and blatant mechanics than Street Fighter 5 was, except it's like during the end of Street Fighter 5, the Championship Edition Street Fighter 5. I would say that that the Season 2 Ironmouse, the Season 2 base Ironmouse, is an easy tier up in terms as a fighting game character, right? Like it'd be the difference between Ryu's Street Fighter 2 appearance, only having Fireball and Shoryuken as the basis of his movesets, to a Street Fighter 6 Ryu, which has all of that, has the basis of that, but also has a much more nuanced combo structure, has the Ninja installed to give him just a little extra boost to his abilities, and also have what was it, that close-up fireball, I forgot his name, the close-up fireball that it's basically if they fall close to you, you can add a huge amount of extra damage to them, right? As well as having an actual super. If Season 1 Ironmouse is basically a cute pink rad VTuber, a Season 2 Ironmouse is the one where all the special mechanics start showing up, right? Just like with all the belts Mr. costume. So yeah, A tier. Easy A tier. And this is when people start thinking, you know what, Ryu's actually not actually that boring, or at least like even if he's boring, I respect the history, and therefore I want to main him, right? Now, from the Season 2 model though, we start expanding a lot more themes, right? Even if it's recognizably an Ironmouse character, we therefore see the game start exploring a lot more niches and going on, which also comes with the introduction of boss characters that tend to be overwhelming to deal with. As an example, we therefore go into one of her latest models, the 2D Brat Princess, which is just an overpowered character design. It's when, like, between the twin drill hairs and the huge ass, like, Ega style, what do we call it? Overcoat? As a dress and everything else. This is when they start implementing boss characters as playables, right? So we're talking about huge ass specials, like full screen lasers, projectiles just spamming this entire stage, and like block strings that last like 30 seconds long if you don't use special mechanics. This is comparable to releasing Asuka in Guilty Gear Strive, where although it's a highly technical character, once you actually get your grasp on the overall mechanics and can get past the fact that zoners tend to have weaknesses, it becomes extremely overwhelming to deal with, right? So this is like Ironmouse at the height of her power. Just like impossible to deal with. For similar reasons, I will also consider her Demon Queen appearance. I think that's not the official name. Let me look up the official name. Underworld Goddess, the 2D Underworld Goddess, as a reinterpretation of Ironmouse as a more serious, deadly character, would also be reflecting in the game's mechanics, right? This is when her specials are really starting to pop off, where it's not just like a Ryu's fireball, but something like dealing with a BB tag character instead, or Blaze Blue like Central Fiction character, right? Where the specials just incredibly overwhelming to deal with. Unfortunately, that also makes it really, really unbalanced. It's definitely a huge change in logic to go from a Street Fighter style character to a Blaze Blue character, and that would be reflecting the huge thematic differences between Ironmouse Season 2 and, of course, the specials, right? So this definitely when it starts getting overwhelming. Now, let me see. I would then, from using the same logic, I would then probably put her idol costume as an A tier instead. High A tier, rather. Because with Ira, let's see. Let me pull up the, here it is. The Village Concert model, which is a really cute one. This would definitely be a change in Ironmouse's mechanics, right? A lot more AOE spells, definitely a lot more special. This is when Ironmouse fighting game will start exploring like thematic specials to go with it, right? Actually, as a result, I think it'll actually be lower A tier then, because although it is really fancy, it is really flashy, and people love playing it, there are issues with a specials focused character in fighting games. In general, the way you balance fighting games is that if you do have somebody that really relies on powerful, like, environment changing or game changing specials, you tend to give up a lot of nuances and their normals to compensate, right? Usually it's going to be stubbier normals. Usually there's going to be in order to use their specials, it's going to be meter locked, and to fit with that, an idle appearance tend to be a lot more limited than a regular stream appearance, right? Than a regular stream model. Like, this is only a model you're going to see if the environment's right or the circumstances permit. It also tends to be time locked because idle shows individual performances only last a couple of minutes for the duration of a song. So this is going to be like an early game model with limited resources. Like, you're on a timer, as if she was a Cinderella type character, that she has to use her specials to dominate the field early, grab the impressions early on, and if you can't quite beat it, then that's bad news. You're getting worn out. And Ironmouse in particular doesn't exactly have the most stamina out of the Vishocho cast, so that would be reflecting game mechanics. Who would be close to Akuma's gameplay? That is an excellent question. For Akuma's gameplay specifically, that would be Dark Ironmouse. That would be the very, very rare appearance of Dark Ironmouse. Just as Akuma was a secret character in Street Fighter that only appeared if you managed to perfect the entire stage without losing any stock, and would trump the actual final boss, the cannot go final boss, replacing the final boss with Akuma. Dark Ironmouse would therefore be Akuma. And just like with Akuma, she tends to be very binary. She's either one of the most powerful characters in the game, or she is just a really, really niche one. And that's mostly because Akuma's game mechanics changes things severely for a lot of people. The ability to do diagonal fireballs, the ability to float in the air to trump anti-air timings, for instance, was really, really hard to deal with in base game mechanics. Now, because the game does change over time, later editions of an Ironmouse fighting game would still have Dark Ironmouse as a playable character, but her relative strength to the rest of the field will really, really depend on the edition. Just like in Street Fighter V, Akuma wasn't exactly the most powerful, and was, as a playable character, was designed as a glass cannon sort of character, right? Like, you have explosive offensive potential, but you can't really take a beating yourself. So niche. It would be a niche appearance. Just as nobody really plays vanilla Ryu anymore. Well, no, it would be different from a matter of vanilla Ryu with mods. It would be a matter of simply, like, it would really, really depend on the edition of the game that you're playing, right? But speaking of niche, what version of this was it again? This was... oh yes, Angel Form. The Angel Form is also a niche character. This would basically be the playable boss model of either a Gaiden spin-off game, or like certain editions as the alternate what if secret boss character, right? And this would be comparable to having Dizzy. Actually, no, Dizzy wasn't exactly a niche character in Guilty Gear, but in terms of gameplay, it would be very much Dizzy, right? It would be like a lot of very, very weird and off-putting mechanics, a lot of projectiles. If you can't figure out how to get past Dizzy's control of the field, you're going to have a really tough time. But at the same time, if you're simply relying on your prior experiences with Mousy, you're going to have a tough time playing Angel Mousy, because Angel Ironmouse is a what if character, right? It fundamentally doesn't share a lot of origins with Ironmouse or the rest of her forms, which all tend to be playing up her demonic modes, or at least her impish characters. And the Angel form would definitely have its fans, but the complexity of the character combined with the fact that it simply isn't a mainstream interpretation of her, would delegate her to a niche role. Now, in contrast, the 2D demon mode still is technically based on Ironmouse. Let me see how would I put this. Yeah, it would be mid A tier as an alternate interpretation of her demon mode. It wouldn't necessarily be as powerful as her boss modes, for instance. I would say that this is a charge character, right? This would be a major change in her base mechanics while still preserving the basic fundamentals. Just as Guile, for instance, still technically has the fireball into Dragon Punch play. The flash kick is basically a basically Dragon Punch. Sonic booms are basically Hadokens, but how you access them is so fundamentally different that a Ryu specialist isn't necessarily going to be a Guile specialist or vice versa, right? So therefore, like Sweet Demon Ironmouse, for instance, isn't going to be necessarily going to be sharing a player base with base form Season 2 Ironmouse, right? Arguably the same generation, similar overall, like basic design, but the embellishments really take it away from the what would be considered like core Ironmouse without necessarily being better or worse for it, right? It's just a really different school of design while still having the same fundamental aim. Now, I would definitely say the Punk Ironmouse would be delegated to unplayable simply because of how relatively rare it is, right? Mousy doesn't sing a lot of punk songs in the first place. It's not necessarily like her main focus. Like I have Ironmouse's soundtrack in the background over here, right? It tends to be a lot of J-pop, J-rock, anime themes, stuff like that. So this is an interpretation of a character that falls really outside of her usual niche. But rather than being a niche character where it's still playable, or at least like has some fundamental quirks that makes her especially popular, like makes that particular model have either gives it a particular purpose or has its devotees, or simply like explores the character in an interesting way. The Punk Ironmouse isn't so far out of her base design as to be that interesting, but it's also like so far out for usual range of themes that there isn't a whole lot of call for her to show up in a game. There's always one or two out like that in the game though, so that isn't necessarily a bad character, but definitely not the one that even a dev team would have the most focus on. Speaking of characters that would have a lot of focus despite being, let's see, like this is the what was it called? It's called the Wonderland Reject Ironmouse. I would say this is a B tier. This is definitely exploration of aesthetics rather than gameplay. Shows up rarely. It's a really cool design, and therefore it would have its fans. But this would be like a special focus character without a whole, like it would share a lot of the fundamental issues with special focused zoning characters or setup characters that otherwise can't really necessarily get the setup without making a lot of sacrifices or making a whole ton of gambits along the way, right? Doesn't show up very often. When it shows up, people are hoping that it does well. Its devotees, I'm sure, would put a lot of hours into figuring out her set play and to figure out her options in specific matchups, but it'll be on the lower end of a tier list just because it's not nearly popular enough and not really developed enough as a character to do well in a tournament setting, right? Like you would be caught off guard by this sort of character in a ranked play, but you would not necessarily see it like be among the top 4 most popular characters in upper echelon play. For similar reasons, I would put down let's see, Race Queen Ironmouse, which is probably her Ludus model, to be honest, as a B tier character as well. She would definitely be more of a rushdown character. Obviously, a streamlined, highly aggressive, like in your face sort of character, just as her design would be. Basically, thinking Cammy, right? Thinking float like a butterfly, thinking like bee, except instead of floating like a butterfly, you're more like zipping around like a maddened horsefly on cocaine. She would be a rushdown character. She is designed as a rushdown character. There's really little disputing of it, but I would say that an Ironmouse game would definitely be biased towards either balanced mid-range play or long-range zoning, right? And a rushdown character would be running into a face full of traps, especially when you see like what you're facing up in the higher levels. You're facing up against either like early game set play characters like Ironmouse or boss mode Ironmouse, which all tends to have really overwhelming dominant like full screen field clearing spells, and that's not an environment that rushdown characters necessarily thrive in. Now, can she handle everybody else? Absolutely. She can usually go toe to toe with the more Shotokan style Ironmouses and all of its derivatives, and definitely anybody that has weaknesses, exploitable weaknesses in their defensive coverage would definitely have a hard time against a rushdown Ironmouse. But there's a reason why she's not necessarily highly ranked, and that's because the field is dominated by spellcasters that absolutely shut down attempts to approach her easily. Now, in contrast, if you do have ranged spells that do set up pretty well, trickster type characters like Trickster Ironmouse can actually find a way to get through. It's not necessarily the easiest gameplay, right? But given that they do overlap with spellcasters, they do have a way in. It's just that set play characters have to be able to set up, and Trickster Ironmouses would be setting up. Yeah, absolutely. The Racer Ironmouse would absolutely have a Common Rider kick. She would definitely have like a huge advantage. If she can get in, she's going to win. If she can get in, your health bar is going to deplete. She's going to hit you with a huge ton of combos, and if you're not blocking from the air, she's going to get in on you. But because of how the field is set up, it's not necessarily going to be the easiest thing. Whereas with the Trickster Ironmouses, for instance, the issue isn't whether or not you can get in on her. The issue is that it's going to be really, really difficult to predict what a Trickster is going to do next. Like, this would be like a Bridget in the field of spellcasters, right? She can probably set up yo-yos, mix you up with the 50-50s, find a way to cross you up. A Trickster Ironmouse is going to have really, really good teleport. Like, we're talking about like Aki level teleport in like 1.0 Idol Showdown, where it was just impossible to both predict and react at the same time. So she's going to get her hits in. They won't be very, very strong hits. And she's not going to exactly be able to take a hit herself. That's the lamentable part of playing Trickster characters. They're really, really fun to play, and they're really frustrating to play against. But because of the fundamental weaknesses involved, their mains tend to be really, really frustrating at the end of the day. Like, when they do well in a tournament, it's a surprise to everybody else, including the player. Because at any time, if the opponent had guessed a 50-50 right, they might have gotten blown up. Especially against the boss characters, right? Lucian's hungry. I actually did eat before the stream, so I'm not that hungry. It's just that I saw Kamen Rider, and I was thinking, ramen. Ramen would be good. Well, I'm always kind of hungry. But anyhow, the point is, like, highly technical Trickster character is going to be gambling for your life. And in some instances, the gamble pays off. You will, every once in a while, once a year, a Trickster Ironmouse will dominate the tournament scene. Just because that their player is that good, and even the top level players can only guess 50-50s correctly so many times. And to their credit, it's one of the best way to beat an S tier player with an S tier character, right? To make it so that their defensive options become reduced to a coin flip. And sometimes they're going to lose. And sometimes they're going to lose multiple times in a row. And therefore, a Trickster character will take the game. Sometimes. Now, Winter Ironmouse is a rarity indeed. And I would say that she's probably shows up in only like one edition of the game, right? Like, the winter outfit comes once a year, rarely at that, and it's almost never played, right? Like, this would be like a special edition of the Ironmouse fighting game. And maybe even only exists as an alternate costume if you buy the DLC or buy the pre-order, right? And therefore, hard to find like anybody that's actively playing that version. And when you see it, you kind of have to like go look up the wiki to see what she does. But also, seasonal thematic characters like this tend to have movesets that reflect that theme, and therefore aren't necessarily the most powerful onto themselves. They tend to be a way to show off the platform's animation capabilities or the studio's animation budget for that particular edition. But they're fun to watch, and because they are so rarely played, when they do show up in the game, or if they find like an alternate version or like a unlocked version in a future edition, people don't necessarily know how to play with or against that character, right? But because of that, it's really niche. It's really niche. You don't really find a lot of people that play that version. But yeah, that's basically how it plays out. Because she is basically Satan, because of Ironmouse's thematics tend to focus a lot about the magical side of demons and demonic rituals and magic and nonsense like that. It is very much a game that favors spellcaster types, or if not spellcaster types, then at least like ways to either control or skip the neutral entirely, right? Which is why basic style Ironmouses tend to suffer a little more. Which is why setup play is not necessarily the best. The punk rock version, for instance, would very much be equivalent to playing Eno without Eno's air dash, or at least air floats, which makes it much harder to get that 50-50 on them. A quick ground dash, for instance, can only carry you so far, and you will really need a dedicated like rush down build to really exploit that once you're actually in their face. But Ironmouse will have way too many ways to knock you straight out of contention that way. So yeah, that was fun. Again, don't take this seriously whatsoever, because there is no such game. I'm mostly just doing this to amuse myself on a Sunday. With a day off tomorrow, actually. That'd be nice. But let me see. But yeah, if you see this later, because they had through SEO or whatever, give me a like, follow, subscribe. I will probably do more tier list made up tier lists just for the sake of it, because they're kind of fun to do and to research and find the assets for. So I'll find more reason to do this, I guess. Ninja Sanji especially has a lot of costumes I could look into, you know? Like, just a whole ton of them. So I'm not against doing more of this in the future. But for now, I do actually need to get dinner. Thank you for checking out the stream. I will probably be streaming Celen's new commission game sometime later this week, maybe even as early as tomorrow, if they can debug some of the major bugs that are currently in that game at the moment. It looks like a nice little detective game. And of course, there will be more Street Fighter and Guilty Gear coming up, and Armored Core 6. As a reminder, however, I'm probably going to be taking Baldur's Gate 3 out of rotation, simply because I'd rather play that at my own leisure and pacing and reading everything, and digesting everything, rather than having to react to everything and trying to move on with plot. Story-driven games tend to be a little less streaming friendly where I'm concerned, because I want to read everything. But yeah, I'll probably see you tomorrow with some Guilty Gear. And yeah, as always, my friends, eat well.